All right, we got a few people here, so we'll get started. And everyone is, I see Craig is here. Craig, you're looking good. The NASCAR track, you're a busy guy. All right, so well, thank you everyone for joining us. Like I said, this is going to be something definitely new. Um, we're we're going to take what we call our podcasting basics class. It's traditionally right around an hour long, and it's a lot of theory behind starting a podcast. Not necessarily a lot of hands-on. So we thought that this one would work really well for the online delivery side of it. And so, like I said, we're just going to go through, what it's going to take to start a podcast, um, things that you want to consider when starting it. Again, a lot of theory, but deciding what your niche is going to be and what's going to separate you from the other people doing the same thing. What can you bring to the table? We are on the free version of Zoom here, and so we are limited to 40 minutes before we get cut off. And so at the very end, I will have a slide with my email address on there. So if you have anything, any questions that we don't get to throughout the next 35 minutes or so, by all means, shoot me an email. We'll be checking those, and I'll respond, to those personally. And so, like I said, we're going to go through an overview, hopefully just give you enough information to pique your curiosity and get started. And then, hopefully be motivated to start podcasting from home. We'll show you some applications that you can download for free, and be able to start tonight if you want. So here is the course outline. Hopefully you guys can see that, and that's all sharing well. We're going to talk about planning your podcast from listener to the problem to your unique solution, coming up with some names for your podcast. Plan some initial episodes so you get a feel for your topic, its longevity, and then you can hit the ground running once you do decide to start. Choose a format for your podcast, whether you're going to do a personal, one-on-one show, you're going to interview someone. What is your format going to be? Choose some equipment and use it to record a show, and we're going to highlight just some quick things there. Produce your show in a sustainable way, make it easy to get it out there. Publish your podcast to iTunes and elsewhere. And then think about the same steps as far as promoting it, using social media, websites, etc. And then if it's something that you're interested in, monetizing that and making some money from this particular podcast. And so here on our first section talks about planning your podcast. What is your podcast going to be about? Who is your podcast for? What is your intended audience? And then finally, giving them a reason to listen to your podcast. So here on the first question, what's your podcast for? Why do you want to make a podcast? And if you have a sheet of paper with you, maybe you can write down some ideas, jot down some notes. Maybe you already have an idea. Maybe it's already fleshed out and you already have ideas as to what you want to do. And so you can jot down some of those ideas. Identify why. Why are you doing this? And then it's important to keep that in mind because you're going to want to stay motivated in creating more and more episodes as you go along. And so, if you're, trying to do it for your, let's say your business, you're always going to have content coming in most cases. If you're a hobbyist, you may, lose ambition once you start going. Maybe you're in 3 or 4 episodes and you've already run out of things to talk about, and so trying to find that motivation and come up with new ideas. So it says here that it's important to keep that why in mind so that you can stay motivated, and even when it's when it's difficult to get a show out. And so here on our next page, we're going to switch gears from the why, and then who is your podcast for? What is your intended audience? Who are you looking to talk to? Are you looking to do customers or clients? Or maybe you're just looking to talk to other hobbyists and, people that share the same interests as you. Maybe you're just, a small business owner and you want to, talk and connect with other small business owners and maybe exchange ideas and give them ideas. Maybe you are somebody trying to reach a customer or client and you want to give them ongoing information that way. One example that we've been seeing is personal trainers, people working at home. They are now forced to, they can't go to the gym and interact with you, so they are coming out with video and on-demand workouts, and then they're also doing the podcast side of it, and so they're trying to reach a specific customer or client, and so they're able to sketch that out. One thing, and this theme will carry on throughout the presentation here today, is identifying a persona, a listener persona, sketching out exactly why this particular person would listen to your podcast, maybe get into some of the details as what this person might do for a living, maybe some socioeconomical factors as well, in order to kind of fine tune that audience. It helps you, deliver your message a little bit better. Fine tune that to a specific audience. But then once you get into the recording side of it, it gives you someone to talk to. So if you can put a name and a face to a particular audience member, and maybe just one audience member, then gives you an idea of someone to talk to rather than just talking to a microphone. And so you also want to talk about how you want to reach them. We want to give them a reason to listen, and you want to give them creative content so that they're able to get something out of that particular podcast. And so when we're giving them a reason to listen, maybe you want someone to lose weight, or you're doing a really entertaining interview with one of your favorite authors, Jim. You're providing value to your listeners. And so not only do you have to give them a reason to listen and a reason to tune in the first place, you want to be able to give them a reason to come back. And so, having a follow-up episode that you're going to tease in that current episode, the rule of thumb that I've been finding is to have 4 or 5 episodes already recorded, and maybe release those all at the all at once at the first go ahead. That gives people a great sampling of what your podcast is going to be about. So that they know that, okay, I'm really hooked now. I've watched 3 or 4 episodes, and now I can go in and I can, continue to follow or subscribe to this particular podcaster. Having those 4 or 5 that come out of the gate initially, good play to start. Some of the research also suggests having a list of, a potential of 12 or 15 episodes that you want to work on, so that you do have that motivation to keep going. That to me seems a little bit extreme, but if it's, if you're a planner and you really want to be successful, then you can definitely plan out those 15 episodes. And so now you've got an audience, you have what you want to talk about, you have a reason to listen, and so what's your podcast going to be about, and coming up with a name for your particular podcast. A lot of names options out there. Here it talks about the clever name, the descriptive name, and then using your own name. And so there are pros and cons of each of them. And so here we look at the clever name. Remember, people need to be able to find it when they're searching for information. So having, descriptive content in there, and buzzwords, trying to incorporate a description into that title. Calling it the Tom Balow Show might not get people to listen. It might not be able, they might not be able to find it. But if I talk and I say, Podcasting Basics by Tom Balow, that's going to extend it a little bit further, give people a more search criteria in order to find my podcast. Next, we talk about the descriptive name. And so here, makes it really, really searchable. Going back to our personal trainer, if you call it the fitness podcast, there's absolutely no doubt as to what your show is going to be about. It does, reduce the memorability, I guess, of it just a bit. Simply calling your show what your target audience is searching for. So, the fitness podcast or the fitness show, definitely helps. It might seem a little bit boring. It's not as exciting as something else. So, trying to balance that, I guess. And then, finally, the third option is using your own name. I think if Oprah had a podcast and it was the Oprah podcast, I think people would watch because she already has that audience. And so if you already have an audience that, naming it after yourself is a good option. But blending all three, incorporating your name along with something descriptive, rock climbing with Michael Smith, or, working out with Tom, or something along those lines, in order to balance between all three options. When we were in Vegas a couple years ago, they were, had a big panel discussion about podcasts. And, after an hour of listening to this panel discuss podcasts, they opened the floor up for a Q&A with audience members. One gentleman got up and talked about the podcast that he and his wife put together, and they live in Colorado. And so smoking marijuana is legal there. And so their podcast dealt with getting high and then reconstructing fairy tales. And so they called their podcast Once Upon a Dime. And so very, very descriptive and clever, and you knew what it was going to be about even before looking into the description of the podcast. So trying to be clever and making it all work definitely allows to market it a little bit better. And so now that you've got an idea of your audience and what your podcast is going to be about and how you're going to present it, and a name for your podcast, breaking that podcast down into specific episodes and planning those episodes. As I mentioned, having 15 of them, 15 ideas before you start is a great idea. But it might be, again, a little extreme. But then, planning those episodes, how long should it be? How often should I release a new episode? Should I podcast in seasons? And then we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of that. And then coming up with the titles for each of those specific episodes. And so how long should your podcast be? And there is no right or wrong answer that I can come up with. Depends on your content. If you have good content, don't cut it down. And if you can say what you want to say in 10 or 15 minutes, don't pad it out to fill a 30-minute commute. Use your best judgment there. Also, it depends on your audience. Is it somebody that's going to be listening on their way to work? As the average commute is right around 20 minutes. Who are they going to, when are they going to be listening? Also, your audience will tell you with no uncertainty whether they think it's too long or too short. People are not afraid to complain, as I'm sure most of you know. Next, how often should I release a new episode? And we get this question a lot. There is no hard and fast rule as to when you should release a new episode, but be consistent with it. If you're going to come out with a new episode every week, that's fine. Just make sure that you're releasing that new episode every week. If you're doing every 2 weeks or once a month, also fine. Just building that consistency. People plan in hours of the day and days of the week, much like you're watching a television show at home. It's on every, Sunday night at 8 o'clock, or your podcast gets released every Monday morning at 8. People plan that way, days of the week, and hours of the day. So following into that will definitely help, it puts that routine in their lives that they can schedule in with everything else. How often depends on the content as well. Again, do you have enough that content constantly changing that you can release something every week, or do you need to do something every 2 weeks? And then again, depends on the audience as well. Is it something that they're going to check in every week? Do they have that kind of time? If you're trying to target emergency room nurses and doctors, they might not have an hour to listen every week. They may have 15 minutes every other week to listen. So again, survey your listeners, ask them what they think is best. But then conversely, if one person complains that your podcast is too long and you have 1,000 listeners, you may not want to act on that immediately. Next is, we talk about the podcasting in seasons. Much like your TV shows that you watch, they release 13 or 26 episodes every week, and then they take a break. That helps you as a podcaster. You've got that, there's an end in sight. That I have to get through 13 or 26 episodes, and then I can take a break. Lets you, rejuvenate yourself. Also breaks up your content, allows you to switch gears, if you will. And so if you have a theme or a topic that you've talked about for maybe 6 or 13 episodes, and so now you're able to take that and switch gears and come up with a new topic or a new approach to that the subject that you're talking about. Then it allows you to also repurpose that content later. And so if you're on a break or a little hiatus, coming up and pulling some things from the previous episodes to create a best of, or a highlight or a throwback Thursday type of thing, you're able to fill those gaps and give your listeners and your subscribers something to fill the void while you're on break. Key here is to not lose momentum while you're on that break. And so if you're taking a break for the summer, making sure that you've let your listeners know when they can expect you back, so that they have a reminder, they're not left in the dark. They know when to come looking for your podcast, but then it also gives you some sort of incentive, that they're counting on you. So, again, don't lose that momentum. The episode titles, again, choose good searchable descriptive titles. Don't leave it simply as episode 1, episode 2. Make it clear as to what your listeners are going to get from your show. I know iTunes specifically, I'm sure that the others will as well. They let you search down to the episode title level. So being as descriptive as you can in those episode titles will be helpful. And I know I'm flying through here, but we're trying to get through in 30 minutes. And the podcast format, a couple of ideas here. The solo show. Here, the benefits, you don't need to rely on anyone else. If you want to record on Thursday night at 9:30, because that's when you have time, you don't have to schedule that with anyone else. You can build a reputation as an authority on your subject. You're not relying on someone else to provide the content. And then that podcast is exclusively yours. So if you're looking to make money or sell that podcast later, that is all yours. Challenges, could be intimidating for a beginner. Next is our co-hosted show. Here, helps eliminate the the mic fright. Someone to share ideas, debate, even mock, if you will, once in a while. Great chemistry creates a great listening experience. Think of so many of your morning radio shows where they have, two co-hosts working with and off of each other. Also gives you motivation. Maybe you don't feel like doing it this week, and so having someone that is relying on you will help keep you motivated. Challenges, trying to get a time to record when you're both available. Who owns that podcast? And so if you're looking to make money off of it, how are you going to split that? And then what happens if one of you loses interest or becomes unavailable in the future? Things to consider before heading off with that type. Interview show. Again, benefits, you're able to talk to your heroes, maybe someone that you want to talk about. I know we do some comic book based webcasts or podcasts at CAM, and so being able to talk to heroes that might be stars in that comic book industry. And then if you do bring guests in, maybe you are interviewing the mayor, for example. He has his entire audience and people that follow him on social media that he's going to bring to your podcast. And so, being able to, work that into your audience as well. Challenges, interviewing is a skill. And so, not everyone can interview. And then you have to find those guests, line them up, rely on them to show up, schedule that and work with that. So there are some challenges to the interview side of it as well. Other formats, a roundtable discussion. If you have 5 or 6 microphones and you pick a topic, everyone can talk about that particular topic, whether it's the environment, politics, economics, whatever, or a documentary style. Maybe you are just going to record a documentary, maybe go out and do some on-site interviews and edit those back in to your podcast at a later date in post-production. The recording your podcast, you'll need some equipment, recording and editing software. Are you going to do some scripting, or are you just going to do it totally off the cuff? Talking into a mic, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then remote guests and co-hosts and how you would work that into your day as well. And so here on the equipment side, the minimum that you need is a computer, a microphone, and some internet access. And so looks like most of you, based on what I'm looking at here on the side, have that already. So you guys are on the right path. Next, you'll need some software in order to record and edit. The first one is Audacity, and this one is free. And so it is easy to use. It's more than adequate for a solo podcaster using a USB microphones, probably what you already have. Again, it is free, totally, downloadable, use it for free. Just getting an error message that we're almost running out of time, so bear with me. And so you can download that from their website. A lot of documentation as well on their website for that one. Another piece of software is called Adobe Audition. This one is a little more complex. This one allows you to put in multiple microphones through an audio interface. So if you have 5 people gathered around a table, it will isolate the recording from each of those microphones so that you can adjust microphone number 2. Maybe that one's too loud or too quiet. You can adjust that one independently of the others. And so that's not available on the free version side. Adobe Audition is more powerful. It does give you that flexibility of adjusting each of those microphones and adding some other effects. But there is an ongoing subscription cost. It is right around $20 a month just for that software. If you bundle it in with all of the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite, it is about $60, and you get 23 software applications. But again, $60 a month is cost prohibitive for some people. Scripting, there are again, pros and cons of scripting. Some people come in and they have their podcast fully scripted. They have word for word typed out what they want to say. Kind of, just like reading to your listeners, more like a sermon. Pastors will come in with a sermon written out, and we'll read that in front of the camera or in the podcast booth. Some people come in with bullet points. It gives you more of an idea that you're talking to your listeners rather than listening, or rather than reading to them. Seems to be a little more conversational. Again, pick a style that works for you. Maybe you start out fully scripted and then work your way down to just a bulleted list. Or maybe you just come in. We do have a few people that come in with absolutely no idea what they're going to talk about. They sit across from each other and just continue their conversation as with no idea at all. So again, whatever works best for you in your particular style. Talking into a microphone, again, can be intimidating, but remember that persona that you created earlier. Focus on that single ideal customer or listener. So maybe you've identified John as your target audience, and you're just going to sit there, have a conversation with John through the microphone. On our next slide here, we talk about remote guests and co-hosts. Certain software applications you can record from Zoom, as we're using here. You can record that. You can record with Skype or other online platforms. So I don't know if you guys watched the Today Show the last couple weeks, but they have their, Savannah Guthrie is working from home, and Al Roker is working from home, and they're able to bring everyone together. Of course, that's on the video side of it, but those are also options on the podcast audio side as well. Moving right along here to the producing your podcast. Again, editing, adding some music and some cover art. Editing, you can do it yourself using those 2 software programs that we talked about. There are also other podcast or audio editing softwares out there, Audacity or Audition. There is also an app on your phone. It's called Anchor, A-N-C-H-O-R. It will actually allow you to record your audio using your cell phone. It will allow you to do some basic editing, cutting off the beginning and end, cutting out some chunks in the middle. Also allows you to add some music and some transitions as well. And so that is called Anchor, A-N-C-H-O-R. Again, an app on your phone. Audacity, Adobe Audition. The editing, you can also outsource it if you want to pay someone to do it if you don't have time. Music, add music at the beginning or the end to add professionalism and production value. Makes it a little nicer to listen to, a little bit of music. Usually somewhere 15 seconds or less. No need to put 45 seconds of intro music at the beginning. Make sure that you legally acquire the rights. Use some royalty-free or stock music. You may have to pay a licensing fee. If you use a website, it's called there's one called freemusicarchive.org. That one is free. There's also a site that I recommend. It's called audiojungle.net. You might find a 15-second piece of music out there, and it might cost you $8 to buy the rights to that. So, the Creative Commons licensed music, that is the freemusicarchive.org. Cover art, that's the picture that goes on the top, much like your Facebook page. It's your first impression, and so again, you can go out and find something in the Creative Commons licensing area there out on Google, download it and use it, or you can have it professionally designed, outsource that. If you have a graphic artist friend or a photographer friend that can create something for you, or you can use a service, Canva, C-A-N-V-A, that has a bunch of templates on it, and you can do it yourself. So you can go to Canva, I believe it's .com, in order to do that as well. Moving right along here to the publishing side. Once you have your audio file done, edited, you've got your music added, you can then publish that somewhere to a media hosting place. If you are using that Anchor app, they have media hosting built into that. This is what stores your audio file for distribution. So you personally don't upload your podcast to iTunes or to Google Podcast or to Spotify. You're going to host it on some sort of platform. Again, Anchor is really good. A lot of our people are using that. And what Anchor will do is it will create those links for you, and it will submit your file to iTunes and Google Podcast and Spotify and a few others, and I can't think of them right now, but the Anchor is doing a great job. Another one is also Podbean, podbean.com. They will allow you to store a certain number of files there for free as well. So that's a good place to get started for free. You can also add it to your own personal website. Some of your hosting accounts will create a website for you included in that package. Or you can incorporate it into your existing website if you already have a website for your business. Or you can go out and create a brand new website for your podcast using WordPress or something along those lines. Next steps, promoting and building your listener base. So many great ideas out there as far as the promotion side of it. Sharing it just on your social media. So for example, if you have a Facebook page or a Twitter account, just sharing links to your podcast that way, in order to build your listener base. Anchor will do a great job of incorporating with your existing, Twitter feed and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and building that listener base. And then also once you build that listener base, then you're able to monetize those podcasts if you're interested. I think one of our groups that come into our studio to record, I think last quarter they got a check for like 13 cents. So there's definitely money to be made in the podcasting side of it. That is, I thank you for your attention. If you have specific questions, we can open the mics up now and ask those and answer those if we can. If not, there is my email address if we do get cut off. And you can definitely shoot me an email and we'll go from there.
Well, Tom, is the Anchor app, would that be available to put right on a Mac desktop?
I know that they have a web interface. I don't know if they have an app that you can download to a desktop or not. I know it's a web-based interface, but they have an app for your mobile phone. All right. Well, thank you guys. Again, shoot me an email. If you want a copy of the, I don't know if it will let you download the slides or not, but if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, I can also send that over as well. Just shoot me an email and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.